For us, a rainy day is a minor inconvenience. You might get your shoes damp walking from the parking lot, or perhaps your umbrella collapses on a windy street. You complain, duck into a heated coffee shop, and dry off while sipping a hot beverage. The modern world has built a massive, multi-layered shield of concrete, glass, and climate control between our fragile bodies and the natural elements. But 40,000 years ago, during the glacial interstadial periods of the late Pleistocene, there was no shield. There were no umbrellas, no heated lobbies, and no waterproof synthetic jackets. In the damp, freezing valleys of ancient Europe, a sudden rainstorm was not an annoyance. It was a high-stakes, life-threatening emergency. When the sky opened up, the temperature did not just drop. The entire landscape transformed into a lethal trap. If your heavy hide clothing became saturated with water, the protective pocket of warm air trapped by the animal fur vanished instantly. You were left essentially naked against the biting wind. The wet cold would seep directly into your skin, rapidly draining the core warmth that kept your heart beating and your limbs moving. Within hours, a simple spring shower could leave a hunter shivering uncontrollably, unable to spark a flame or hold a wooden spear. To our prehistoric ancestors, every dark cloud on the horizon was a silent predator, a threat that could end your life long before a mammoth or a cave bear ever crossed your path. Survival in the wild was not about finding comfort. It was a constant, calculated struggle to remain dry. To understand why wetness was so deadly to a Pleistocene hunter, we must look at the fundamental laws of thermodynamics. Air is actually a highly inefficient conductor of heat. When you stand in dry, cold air, your body naturally warms up a thin, microscopic boundary layer of air right next to your skin. As long as the wind does not blow this warm layer away, it acts as a tiny, invisible thermal blanket that insulates you. Water, however, operates under entirely different physical rules. Water is a highly efficient thermal sponge. It conducts heat away from your body 25 times faster than air. The moment your skin or clothing becomes soaked, that protective boundary layer of warm air is instantly destroyed. The cold water acts like a physical siphon, rapidly pulling heat directly from your core. If the temperature is near freezing, wet clothing can reduce your survival window from days to a matter of hours. This rapid heat loss triggers a terrifying physiological descent toward hypothermia. First, the brain detects the drop in core temperature and initiates involuntary muscle contractions, which we recognize as shivering. Shivering is your body's desperate effort to generate internal heat through rapid motion, but it consumes a massive amount of energy, burning through your body's limited fat and sugar stores at an unsustainable rate. If you cannot dry off, your core temperature drops below 95 degrees Fahrenheit. At this stage, blood vessels in your arms and legs constrict, redirecting warm blood to your heart and lungs. Your fingers grow numb, and you lose the dexterity needed to handle tools. You cannot tie knots, you cannot construct a shelter, and you cannot strike stones together to spark a fire. As your brain cools, cognitive decline sets in, leading to confusion and poor decisions. For our ancestors, rain was a physical assault that systematically shut down their biological machinery. To survive this constant threat of wet hypothermia, Pleistocene humans had to engineer active, reliable defenses against the damp landscape of glacial Europe. Their absolute most critical weapon was fire, but starting a new flame during a torrential downpour is nearly impossible. Instead of relying on friction's sparks in the wet, our ancestors mastered the art of carrying fire across vast distances. Specialized firekeepers selected glowing, dense embers from the camp hearth and wrapped them carefully in tightly packed layers of damp peat moss. This bundle was then placed inside a hollowed-out bison horn or a tightly rolled cylinder of birch bark. The damp moss insulated the ember from the outside air, while the restricted oxygen inside the container allowed the ember to smolder slowly without burning out or setting the container ablaze. This simple device could keep a hot coal alive for an entire day, allowing a moving band to ignite a new campfire instantly when they reached their next destination. When they did stop, their shelters acted as hydrodynamic shields. For brief stops, they constructed simple lean-tos using thick, angled pine branches, placing the needles downward to funnel rain away from the sleeping area. For long-term winter campsites, they built sophisticated heavy-duty huts. They used massive mammoth bones as structural ribs, locking large tusks together to form a sturdy, dome-shaped frame. Over this frame, they draped heavy mammoth and horse hides, anchoring them to the ground with heavy stones. The slope of these structures was carefully calculated. A steep angle forced rainwater to slide off immediately before it could penetrate the seams. Furthermore, their clothing was a triumph of prehistoric chemical engineering. Raw hides absorb water, stretch, and eventually rot, so hunter-gatherers developed a multi-step tanning process. They scraped fat from the skins, rubbed them with animal brains to soften the fibers, and then smoked them over greenwood fires. The smoke deposited tar and formaldehyde compounds directly into the leather, creating a highly waterproof, flexible shield that deflected rain while trapping vital body heat. While physical shelters and treated leather provided external defense, survival also required an intimate mental map of the changing landscape and remarkable biological adaptability. Pleistocene humans possessed sensory capabilities that modern humans, insulated by technology, have largely lost. Long before the first raindrops fell, our ancestors could smell the approaching storm. When humidity rises before a heavy rain, dry soil releases an organic compound called geosmin, producing the distinct, earthy scent known as petrichor. The human nose is remarkably sensitive to this compound, capable of detecting it at concentrations of just 5 parts per trillion. This chemical early warning system allowed hunting parties to seek cover hours before a storm actually arrived. They also watched the animal kingdom for warning signs. A sudden drop in barometric pressure caused insects to stop flying and seek shelter under leaves, while birds flew closer to the forest floor where the air was denser and easier to navigate. Understanding these natural patterns kept our ancestors out of danger. When choosing campsites, they avoided the low basin floors of glacial valleys, which could quickly turn into deadly channels of mud and water from melting ice sheets, and instead constructed their camps on elevated river terraces with natural drainage. Beyond environmental awareness, their own bodies adapted to the cold and wet. Modern humans exposed to icy rain often experience sudden cold shock, leading to hyperventilation, panic, and rapid loss of coordination. In contrast, Pleistocene humans developed heightened physiological resilience. Through constant exposure, their bodies maintained a high percentage of active brown adipose tissue, a special type of fat packed with mitochondria. Unlike normal white fat, which simply stores energy, brown fat burns calories to generate heat directly, keeping the core warm without relying on energy-draining shivering. Additionally, their cardiovascular systems utilized a process called the hunting reaction, where blood vessels in the extremities would cyclically constrict and dilate, preventing tissue damage in wet fingers and toes while still conserving core body heat. While physiological adaptations kept individuals alive, the ultimate survival mechanism of our ancestors was the cooperative social group. Inside the dark, tight confines of a mammoth-bone shelter, the community formed a collective thermal barrier against the elements. By huddling closely together, they dramatically reduced the surface area exposed to the cold, damp air, pooling their body heat to keep infants, mothers, and the sick warm through the coldest nights. But the social shield was cognitive as well as physical. In a world without writing, survival knowledge was stored exclusively in the minds of the elders. During prolonged, catastrophic wet seasons that occurred only once every few generations, the long-term memory of an elder was the difference between life and death. They remembered which caves remained dry during historic floods, which plants became toxic when waterlogged, and how to locate clean drinking water when surface runoff turned muddy and contaminated. Beyond collective memory, managing resources was crucial when heavy storms forced the group to remain inside for days. They utilized sophisticated food preservation and caching techniques to survive periods of enforced inactivity. Digging storage pits deep into the permafrost created natural freezers, while smoking meat over low, smoky hearth fires dried it out, preventing the growth of destructive mold and bacteria in damp conditions. When hunters did venture out into the rain, they did so with strategic intent. Rain-soaked landscapes offered unique hunting and gathering opportunities that dry weather did not. Wet earth made tracking game far easier, as animals left deep, distinct prints in the soft mud. The damp weather also triggered the emergence of edible fungi and land snails, which were easily gathered by children and elders without expending precious energy on a high-speed chase. Rain also muffled the sounds of footsteps, allowing hunters to stalk prey much closer than would be possible on dry, crunchy twigs. By transforming a hostile environment into a series of opportunities, the clan turned the wet seasons from a period of dread into a time of calculated abundance. Far from merely hiding from the rain, our ancestors actively sought out these wet, challenging environments. In the arid landscapes of the Pleistocene, water was the ultimate catalyst for life. Wet interstadial periods and river valleys brought lush vegetation, migrating herds, and a wealth of resources that dry tundras could never support. The deluge was not a curse to be avoided, but a seasonal landscape of opportunity that fueled the expansion of early human populations. Every drop of rain that fell was a driver of innovation, forcing our ancestors to develop the technologies, social structures, and mental maps that would define our species. Today, we sit in climate-controlled rooms, complaining about a rainy morning commute, protected by layers of concrete, asphalt, and synthetic waterproof fabrics. Yet, every piece of modern infrastructure we rely on is a direct descendant of the survival strategies developed 40,000 years ago. The central heating in our homes trace their lineage back to the carefully guarded hearth fires of the mammoth-bone shelters. Our modern raincoats are nothing more than high-tech updates to the animal hides treated with brain oils and fish fats. We are the children of the storm, descendants of the resilient innovators who refused to freeze in the damp dark of glacial Europe. By understanding how they mastered the elements, we gain a deeper appreciation for the complex foundations of our own civilization. If you want to continue exploring the hidden history of human resilience and the ingenious ways our ancestors conquered prehistoric challenges, consider subscribing to the channel. The next time a rainstorm ruins your afternoon plans, remember the generations who stood in the freezing downpour and chose to thrive.